A single text to the wrong number leads a pregnant Amaya to a stranger who won't walk away. But when she learns he's the CEO of the company denying her care, trust shatters, just as she's about to give birth. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The morning sickness had finally subsided, but Amaya Blake's worries hadn't. At 7 months pregnant, her small apartment felt emptier than ever. The pale blue walls of what would become the nursery remained bare. No decorations, no crib, just a single rocking chair she'd found at a yard sale. "We'll make it work," she whispered, running her hands over her rounded belly. "Just you and me." At 29, Amaya had never imagined she'd be facing motherhood alone, but life had other plans. She still remembered the look on Derek's face when she'd told him the news, how his eyes had widened, how he'd mumbled something about needing air, how he'd walked out the door and never returned. 3 weeks later, he'd emptied their joint account and disappeared. No calls, no texts, no explanations. "Good riddance," Amaya said aloud, her voice echoing in the empty apartment. But sometimes in the quiet hours of the night, doubt crept in like a thief. Would she be enough for her daughter? Could she provide everything a child needed? The digital? Clock on her nightstand read 11:42 p.m. Another sleepless night. Outside her window, rain tapped gently against the glass, a soothing rhythm that couldn't quite calm her racing thoughts. Amaya reached for her phone, scrolling through her meager contact list. She'd moved 3 states away after Derek left, taking a job as an administrative assistant at a small tech company. The pay was decent, but the hours were long and she hadn't made many friends yet. Her thumb hovered over her cousin Melissa's name. They'd been close as children, but had drifted apart over the years. Still, Melissa had been the only one who'd called regularly since the move, checking in every Sunday without fail. Amaya set the phone down and walked to the full-length mirror in her bedroom. She lifted her oversized sweater, a soft grey one she'd splurged on last week, revealing her rounded belly. In the dim light, she looked different somehow. Stronger, maybe, or just more alone. On impulse, she picked up her phone again and snapped a photo. Her face wasn't visible, just her belly cradled in her hands wrapped in that soft grey sweater. She typed a message to Melissa. "I'm scared, but I'm trying to be strong for her." Her thumb hit send before she realized she hadn't checked the number. Exhaustion had made her careless. The message had gone to an unknown number, one she didn't recognize. "Great," Amaya muttered. "Just great." She was about to set the phone down when it buzzed with a reply. Her heart jumped to her throat. Who would respond at this hour? The message read, "You don't know me, but I think you're already stronger than you realize. Can I ask, would you ever let someone show up for you, even if it's a stranger?" Amaya stared at the words, reading them over and over. There was something about them, something honest and raw, that made her pause instead of immediately blocking the number. "I'm sorry," she typed back. "That message wasn't meant for you." The reply came quickly. "I figured, but my question still stands." Across the city, in a penthouse overlooking the skyline, Gideon Hart set his phone down on the glass coffee table and ran a hand through his dark hair. He hadn't meant to respond to the wrong number text. He wasn't even sure why he had. The photo had caught him off guard. A pregnant woman, alone, scared but trying to be brave. It had stirred something in him, memories he'd tried so hard to bury. Gideon walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse. The city lights glittered below like fallen stars. From up here, everything looked small, manageable. But he knew better. Life wasn't manageable. It was messy and unpredictable and sometimes unbearably painful. His phone buzzed again. He hesitated before picking it up. "No one just shows up without wanting something in return," the message read. Gideon found himself smiling, a rare expression these days. Whoever this woman was, she wasn't naive. "Fair point," he typed back. "But what if someone just recognized something in your message, something familiar?" In her apartment, Amaya sat on the edge of her bed, uncertain why she was continuing this conversation with a stranger. It wasn't like her to be so trusting, but something about the responses felt genuine, lacking the creepy vibe she might have expected. "And what would that be?" she asked. The sound of someone trying to be brave when they're terrified, came the reply. I know it well. Amaya's breath caught. The words hit too close to home, piercing the armor she'd carefully constructed around herself. Who are you? She typed. Just someone who's been alone too long, the stranger replied. My name is Gideon, and I promise I'm not a serial killer or a scammer, just a person who saw your message and couldn't ignore it. Amaya hesitated, her thumbs hovering over the screen. Common sense told her to end the conversation now, but something else, something deeper, made her type. I'm Amaya, and I'm having a girl in about 2 months. Her father decided fatherhood wasn't for him. She hit send before she could change her mind. Then, to her surprise, her phone rang. The same unknown number. Amaya stared at the screen, heart pounding. After 4 rings, she answered. Hello? Her voice was barely a whisper. I'm sorry, came a deep voice on the other end. I shouldn't have called, it's just sometimes texting feels too impersonal. But this is probably crossing a line. It is, Amaya agreed, but she didn't hang up. Why did you really respond to my text? There was a pause, then. My sister died in childbirth 3 years ago. She was alone when it happened. The baby, too. I wasn't there. I should have been, but I wasn't. The raw pain in his voice made Amaya's eyes sting with tears. I'm sorry, she said softly. It's just, when I saw your picture, saw your message about being scared but trying to be strong, it reminded me of her. And I thought maybe this time I could... He trailed off. Be there? Amaya finished for him. Yes, Gideon admitted. But I realize how strange this must seem. Amaya should have been frightened. She should have ended the call. Instead, she found herself asking, what was her name? Your sister. Emma? Gideon said, his voice softening. Her name was Emma. They talked for over an hour. Gideon never asked for personal details, where she lived, what she did, anything that might have seemed intrusive. Instead, he asked about her pregnancy, if she had support, if she was taking care of herself. Amaya found herself sharing more than she had with anyone since moving. How she'd left her old life behind, how she was starting over, how sometimes the silence in her apartment was so loud it kept her awake. I should let you sleep, Gideon finally said. It's late, and you need rest. Probably, Amaya agreed, surprised, to find herself reluctant to end the call. This was unexpected. Good unexpected or restraining order unexpected? There was a smile in his voice that made Amaya laugh, a real laugh for the first time in weeks. I haven't decided yet, she said, but I'm leaning toward good. After they hung up, Amaya lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Common sense told her to block the number, to chalk this up as a strange but ultimately meaningless encounter. But something else, something that felt a lot like hope, made her save the contact in her phone. She named it Wrong Number. At his penthouse, Gideon stood at the windows again, phone still in hand. For the first time in years, the weight on his chest felt a little lighter. He saved her number too, simply as Amaya. He hadn't told her who he really was. Gideon Hart, tech billionaire, founder of Hart Medical Technologies, the man whose face had graced the cover of Forbes 3 times before he'd withdrawn from public view after Emma's death. He hadn't mentioned the hospitals he'd built in her memory, or the maternal care foundations he'd established, or the fact that he hadn't had a real conversation with anyone outside his immediate staff in months. For once, someone had talked to him without knowing what he could do for them, without knowing he could buy and sell companies with a phone call, without seeing him as anything other than a voice on the other end of a wrong number. It felt real. The next morning, Amaya woke to the sound of her doorbell. She wasn't expecting anyone, and for a moment, panic fluttered in her chest. Had Gideon somehow found her address? She peeked through the peephole to see a delivery man holding a large basket. Cautiously, she opened the door. Delivery for Amaya Blake, the man said cheerfully. The basket contained prenatal vitamins, herbal teas for pregnancy, a soft blanket, and a stuffed elephant. There was a card that simply read, "For strength, G." No last name, no phone number. Just the initial. Amaya's phone buzzed with a text. Too much, I realized after I sent it that it might seem creepy. I just wanted to do something helpful." She sat on her couch, running her fingers over the soft blanket. She should be freaked out. This crossed a line. "And yet, how did you know my last name and address?" she typed. The reply was immediate. "I didn't. I used a service that only requires a phone number. They find the delivery address. I never see it. If it makes you uncomfortable, I won't do it again." Amaya considered this. She should still be upset, but the thoughtfulness of the gift touched her. It had been so long since anyone had done something kind for her without being asked. "The blanket is nice," she texted back, "and I was running low on vitamins." That evening after work, Amaya's phone rang. Gideon again. This time she answered. On the second ring. "Is this going to become a habit?" she asked, trying to sound stern but failing. "Only if you want it to," Gideon replied. "I can stop." "No," Amaya said quickly, surprising herself. "I mean, it's fine, I don't mind." And so it began. Every evening Gideon would call. They'd talk about their days, about books they were reading, about nothing and everything. He never pushed for details about her life, and she never asked about his. It was as if they existed in a bubble separate from the real world. 2 weeks passed this way. Amaya found herself looking forward to the calls, to hearing Gideon's deep voice, to the way he listened, really listened, to everything she said. One night, as they talked, Amaya felt a sharp pain in her abdomen. She gasped. "What's wrong?" Gideon asked immediately, concern evident in his voice. "Just a cramp," Amaya said, but her voice was tight with worry. "It's probably nothing. Have you called your doctor? It's almost midnight. I don't want to bother—" Another pain cut her off. "Amaya," Gideon's voice was firm, "call your doctor now, please." There was something in his tone that broke through her stubbornness. She promised she would, and hung up to make the call. The doctor advised her to come to the emergency room as a precaution. Amaya looked at the time, then at the rain pouring outside her window. The thought of calling a cab, of going to the hospital alone, made her throat tighten with fear. Her phone buzzed with a text from Gideon. "Are you okay? What did the doctor say?" Before she could talk herself out of it, she replied, "I need to go to the hospital, just as a precaution, but I'm scared." His response came immediately. "Tell me which hospital. I'll meet you there." Amaya stared at the words, a strange mix of relief and apprehension washing over her. She'd never met this man. She didn't know what he looked like, what he did, who he really was, but as another cramp gripped her, she realized something. She didn't want to be alone tonight. With trembling fingers, she typed the name of the hospital. "I'll be there," came Gideon's reply. "And Amaya, everything's going to be okay, I promise." As she called for a taxi, Amaya wondered if she was making a huge mistake. But for the first time in months, she didn't feel quite so alone, and sometimes that was enough. The emergency room buzzed with activity as Amaya sat in an uncomfortable plastic chair, one hand on her belly, the other clutching her phone. The taxi ride had been nerve-wracking, each bump in the road amplifying her fears. What if something was wrong with the baby? What if she lost her daughter before she even had a chance to meet her? And beneath those fears ran another current of anxiety. She was about to meet a complete stranger, a man she'd spoken to only over the phone, whose face she'd never seen. Amaya Blake. A nurse appeared with a clipboard. "We're ready for you." As Amaya stood, another cramp seized her. She gasped, doubling over slightly. "Let's get you into a room right away," the nurse said, concern evident in her voice. They were halfway down the corridor when a deep voice called, "Out, Amaya!" She turned to see a tall man with dark hair and worried eyes. He wore jeans and a rumpled button-down shirt, as if he'd dressed in a hurry. His face was striking, not conventionally handsome, but compelling, with strong features and intense eyes that seemed to see right through her. "Gideon?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. His voice was unmistakable, even in that single word. He nodded, taking a step toward her before stopping, seemingly unsure of his welcome. "Sir, are you family?" the nurse asked. Before Amaya could answer, Gideon said, "I'm her friend. She shouldn't be alone right now." The nurse looked to Amaya for confirmation. After a moment's hesitation, she nodded. "He can come. In the examination room, Amaya changed into a hospital gown while Gideon waited outside. When he was allowed back in, he sat in the chair beside the bed, keeping a respectful distance. "Thank you for coming," Amaya said softly. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," Gideon replied simply. Then, with a small smile, "Though this isn't exactly how I imagined our first meeting." Despite her anxiety, Amaya found herself smiling back. "How did you imagine it?" "With less medical equipment, for starters." A doctor entered before Gideon could say more. Dr. Patel was a woman in her 50s, with kind eyes and an efficient manner. She examined Amaya thoroughly, asking questions about her pregnancy and medical history. "The good news," she said finally, "is that your baby seems perfectly fine. The heartbeat is strong and there are no signs of distress." Amaya nearly collapsed with relief. "And the cramps?" "Braxton Hicks contractions, most likely. False labor. But given your history and the fact that you're alone, I'd like to keep you overnight for observation." Amaya's face fell. An overnight stay would be expensive, and her insurance situation was complicated. Her new job's benefits hadn't fully kicked in yet, and her application for additional maternity coverage had been denied due to some technical issue. "Is that really necessary?" she asked. Dr. Patel's expression softened. "It's just a precaution, but yes, I believe it is." Gideon, who had been silent during the examination, spoke up. "She won't be alone tonight. I'll stay with her." Dr. Patel looked between them, nodded and left to arrange the admission. "You don't have to stay," Amaya said once they were alone. "You've already done more than enough." Gideon leaned forward, his eyes serious. "What's really bothering you?" "Is it the cost?" Amaya looked away. She hated talking about money, hated the vulnerability of admitting she couldn't afford something. "My insurance is complicated right now." "Let me help," he said immediately. "No." Amaya's voice was firm. "I don't take charity." "It's not charity if it's from a friend. Is that what we are?" "Friends?" Amaya asked, truly curious. "We've known each other for 2 weeks, through a wrong number text." Gideon was quiet for a moment, considering. "I think we're whatever we choose to be. Labels don't matter much to me." There was something about his directness that Amaya found refreshing. No games, no hidden agenda, just honest words. "I'll stay tonight," she decided, "but I'll figure out the bill myself." Gideon nodded, respecting her decision. "Then I'll stay too, just to keep you company." The night passed slowly. Amaya drifted in and out of sleep, aware of Gideon's presence in the chair beside her bed. He declined the nurse's offer to bring a cot, insisting he was fine where he was. In the dim light of the hospital room, with machines beeping softly. In the background, they talked more openly than they had over the phone. "Tell me more about Emma," Amaya said during one quiet moment. "Your sister." Gideon's face softened at the mention of her name. "She was the best of us. Kind, smart, always. Laughing. She got pregnant unexpectedly, but she was so happy about it. Her boyfriend, Ban, wasn't. He left early in the pregnancy. The parallel to Amaya's situation hung in the air between them. I was supposed to be there when she went into labor," Gideon continued, his voice tight. "But I was stuck in meetings overseas. Important business that couldn't wait, or so I thought. By the time I got the message that something was wrong, it was too late." "What happened?" Amaya asked gently. "Complications. Preeclampsia that wasn't caught in time. She and the baby both died before I could get there." He looked down at his hands. "I keep thinking that if someone had been with her, if she hadn't been alone." Amaya reached out, touching his arm. "It wasn't your fault. My head knows that. My heart is still catching up." He looked at her directly. "That's why I couldn't ignore your text. It felt like a second chance somehow." The honesty in his eyes made Amaya's heart ache. This man carried so much pain, yet he'd rushed to a hospital in the middle of the night for a woman he barely knew. "Thank you," she said simply. Morning came, bringing sunshine through the hospital blinds and good news from Dr. Patel. Amaya was free to go home, with instructions to rest and call immediately if the contractions returned. As they waited for her, discharge papers, Amaya's phone buzzed with an email notification. She read it, her face falling. "What's wrong?" Gideon asked. Just more insurance trouble, she said, trying to sound casual. The company denied my maternity coverage appeal again. Some issue with my application timing. Gideon frowned. Which company? Heart Medical Technologies. Amaya sighed. It's a big healthcare startup that my company contracts with for insurance. I've been trying to get through to someone who can help for weeks, but it's all automated responses. Gideon's face went completely still. Something flashed in his eyes, recognition, alarm, guilt, but was quickly masked. That's frustrating, he said carefully. Have you tried reaching out to their customer service directly? Amaya laughed, without humor. Multiple times. I get transferred around and eventually disconnected. It's like trying to talk to a wall. I might know someone who works there, Gideon said after a pause. I could make a call, see if they can look into it. You know someone at Heart? Amaya asked, surprised. That would be amazing, though I don't want to impose. It's no imposition, Gideon assured her. Let me see what I can do. Later, as they walked to Amaya's apartment building, Gideon had insisted on seeing her home safely. An awkward silence fell between them. They'd shared so much in the hospital, but now in the daylight reality was setting in. So, Amaya said as they reached her door. This is me, Gideon nodded, hands in his pockets. Nice building. It's not much, but it's home. She hesitated, then asked, would you like to come in? I could make coffee. The invitation surprised them both, but after spending the night together, albeit in a hospital room, it felt strange to simply say goodbye. I'd like that, Gideon said. Inside, Amaya's apartment was small but neat. The living room flowed into a tiny kitchen, with a short hallway leading to what Gideon assumed were the bedroom and bathroom. There were few decorations, as if she hadn't fully moved in yet. It's still a work in progress, Amaya explained, seeing him look around. I haven't had time to really make it homey. It's nice, Gideon said sincerely. Cozy. While Amaya made coffee, Gideon noticed a door slightly ajar. The nursery, he realized. Without thinking, he walked over and peered inside. The room was nearly empty, save for a rocking chair and a small bookshelf with a few children's books. No crib, no changing table, none of the usual baby furniture. I haven't had a chance to set it up properly, Amaya said from behind him, her voice defensive. I'm working on it. Gideon turned, seeing the coffee mugs in her hands and the vulnerability in her eyes. I wasn't judging, he said quickly. I was just curious. They sat on her small couch, drinking coffee and talking about safer topics, books they'd read recently, movies they'd seen, the unusually warm weather for the season. I should probably get going, Gideon said eventually, setting down his empty mug. You need to rest. Right. Amaya felt a pang of disappointment. Will we still talk? On the phone, I mean. Gideon smiled, and it transformed his face, making him look younger, less burdened. I'd like that, very much. At the door they faced each other awkwardly, neither sure how to say goodbye. Finally, Gideon held out his hand. It was nice to finally meet you in person, Amaya Blake. She took his hand, surprised by the warmth of his touch. Likewise, Gideon. Hart, he supplied. Gideon Hart. The name hung in the air between them. Amaya's brow furrowed. Hart. Like Heart Medical Technologies, he confirmed, his expression guarded. I should have told you sooner. I'm the founder and CEO. Amaya dropped his hand as if burned. You're the CEO of the company that's been denying my insurance claims? The one I've been fighting with for weeks? Gideon winced. I didn't know about your situation until you mentioned it today. I've been less involved in day-to-day operations recently. Less involved? Amaya's voice rose. Your company has policies that are hurting real people, people like me, and you're less involved. It's complicated, Gideon said, running, a hand through his hair. After Emma died, I stepped back from a lot of things. I still own the company, but I've let others handle the management. And those others decided that pregnant women don't deserve proper coverage. Amaya crossed her arms, anger replacing her earlier warmth. That's not what we... Gideon stopped, himself. That's not what the company stands for. I'll look into it personally, I promise. Why should I believe you? Amaya asked, hurt evident in her voice. You've been lying to me this whole time. I haven't lied, Gideon insisted. I just didn't tell you everything. A lie by omission is still a lie. They stood in tense silence. The connection they'd built over the past weeks suddenly strained. I should go, Gideon said finally. But I meant what I said. I'll fix this, not just for you, but for everyone affected. Amaya didn't respond, just watched as he walked away, the door closing behind him with a soft click. Alone in her apartment, she sank onto the couch, emotions warring within her. Part of her was furious at the deception, but another part remembered the man who'd sat beside her hospital bed all night, who'd shared the pain of losing his sister, who'd looked at her empty nursery without judgment. Her phone buzzed with a text. I'm sorry. I should have told you sooner. But everything else, our conversations, my concern for you, that was all real. Amaya didn't reply. Instead, she opened her laptop and searched for Gideon Hart. Dozens of articles appeared, along with images of the man she'd just had coffee with, though in the photos, he wore expensive suits and the polished look of wealth and power. Forbes called him the reclusive billionaire. The Wall Street Journal described him as a tech genius who disappeared from public view. And People magazine had once named him one of their most eligible bachelors. Gideon Hart wasn't just wealthy, he was a billionaire. A tech mogul who'd revolutionized healthcare technology before withdrawing from public life 3 years ago, right around the time his sister died. The more Amaya read, the more distant he seemed from the man she'd come to know. How could someone with that much power and money understand her struggles, the daily worry about bills, the fear of bringing a child into the world without a safety net? Her phone buzzed again. I'm not asking for forgiveness, just a chance to make things right. Amaya set the phone aside, too confused and hurt to respond. She needed time to think, to process everything she'd learned. As she moved to the nursery and sat in the rocking chair, hands cradling her belly, her daughter kicked, a strong, defiant movement that brought tears to Amaya's eyes. What do you think, little one? She whispered. Can we trust him? The baby kicked again as if in response. Amaya closed her eyes, remembering Gideon's words in the hospital, the pain in his voice when he spoke of Emma, the way he'd rushed to be by her side in the middle of the night. Billionaire or not, that concern had felt real, but now there was a wall between them, built of his omissions and her fears. Could it be breached? Did she even want it to be? As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the empty nursery, Amaya rocked gently, torn between her heart and her head, between trust and caution. And miles away, in his penthouse office, Gideon Hart stared at his unanswered text, wondering if he'd just lost something precious before it had really begun. 3 days passed without communication between Amaya and Gideon. 3 days of Amaya checking her phone more often than she'd care to admit. 3 days of Gideon drafting messages he never sent. On the 4th morning, Amaya received an email from Hart Medical Technologies. Her insurance appeal had been reviewed and approved. Not only would her maternity care be fully covered, but the policy had been retroactively applied to cover her hospital stay. At the bottom of the email was a personal note. This was never about you specifically. It was about a system I let run without oversight. I'm sorry. Amaya stared at the message, conflicted. Part of her was relieved. The financial burden lifted from her shoulders was immense, but another part felt uncomfortable, as if she'd accepted special treatment. Her phone rang. It was her cousin Melissa calling for their weekly check-in. How are you feeling? Melissa asked after they'd exchanged greetings. Pregnant, Amaya replied with a small laugh. Very, very pregnant. Only 6 weeks to go. Have you finished setting up the nursery yet? Amaya sighed. Not exactly. I've been meaning to, but work has been busy and I'm always so tired. You can't keep putting it off, Amaya. Babies don't wait for convenient timing. I know. Amaya ran a hand over her belly. I'll get it done. After chatting a while longer, Melissa asked, So, anything new? Anyone new? Amaya hesitated. Sort of. It's complicated. Ooh, complicated how? Spill it. For the first time, Amaya shared the story of the wrong number text, the midnight hospital visit, and the revelation of Gideon's identity. "Wait," Melissa interrupted. "Gideon Hart, the billionaire. You've heard of him. Everyone's heard of him. He was all over the news a few years ago. Tech genius, healthcare revolutionary, and then he just disappeared from public view. And you're telling me you accidentally texted him a picture of your baby bump?" "That's the short version, yes." Melissa laughed. "Only you, Amaya. So what happened after you found out who he was?" Amaya explained about the insurance issue and how it had been resolved. "And you haven't talked to him since, even though he fixed your problem?" "That's the thing," Amaya said, frustration evident in her voice. "He only fixed it because it was me. What about all the other pregnant women dealing with the same issue? It's not right." There was a pause before Melissa responded. "Have you checked the news today?" "No. Why?" "Maybe you should." After hanging up, Amaya searched for Hart Medical Technologies online. The most recent news article published that morning announced a major policy overhaul at the company. Hart was implementing new, inclusive maternity coverage guidelines, effective immediately and retroactive for the past 6 months. The company was also establishing a patient advocacy department to address coverage disputes. The article quoted an internal memo from Gideon Hart himself. "We've lost sight of our founding mission to make healthcare accessible to all. That changes today." Amaya sat back, stunned. He hadn't just fixed her problem. He'd fixed the system. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Check your front door." Cautiously, Amaya went to the door and opened it. A delivery person was just walking away, having left a large box. Inside was a bassinet, simple, but beautiful, made of natural wood with a soft mattress and organic cotton sheets. The card read, "Every baby deserves a safe place to sleep. No strings attached. GPS, new number. Old phone had an unfortunate accident involving coffee and gravity." Amaya ran her hand over the smooth wood of the bassinet. It wasn't extravagant or flashy, just practical, thoughtful, exactly what she needed. Before she could talk herself out of it, she texted the new number. "The bassinet is perfect, thank you." His reply came almost immediately. "You're welcome. How are you feeling?" "Better. I saw the news about Hart Medical's policy changes. It was overdue. I've been too disconnected from the company. That's changing now." Amaya hesitated, then typed, "Why did you disappear?" "After Emma died." There was a long pause before his response. "Grief, guilt, the usual suspects. I threw myself into building hospitals in her name, but I couldn't face the day-to-day operations of my own company. It was easier to hide behind philanthropy than to actually be present." His honesty disarmed her. "And now?" "Now I'm trying to be present. It's harder than I remembered." Amaya smiled at that. Most worthwhile things are. Over the next 2 weeks, they fell back into their routine of evening phone calls. But now there was a new openness between them. The weight of secrets lifted. Gideon never mentioned the bassinet again, never used it as leverage to see her. Instead, he respected her space, content with their calls and occasional texts. One evening, as they talked about books they'd loved as children, Amaya mentioned her empty nursery. "I keep putting it off," she admitted, "partly because I'm exhausted all the time, but also, I think I'm afraid." "Of what?" Gideon's voice was gentle. "Of making it real. As long as the room is empty, I can pretend I still have time to figure everything out. Would it help to have company? When you're ready to set it up, I mean." Amaya considered this. The idea of facing the empty room with someone else by her side was appealing. "Maybe. Yes. Just say when." The when came 3 days later on a Saturday morning. Amaya woke feeling surprisingly energetic and decided it was time. She texted Gideon, "Today's the day, nursery setup. If you're still offering," his response, "I'll be there in an hour, with breakfast." True to his word, Gideon arrived with bagels, fruit, and decaf coffee. He'd also brought tools, just in case. Amaya's living room now contained several boxes of baby items she'd ordered online but hadn't unpacked: a crib, a changing table, a small dresser. "I may have gone overboard with the online shopping," she said sheepishly. Gideon surveyed the boxes. I think we can handle this. Where do you want to start? They spent the day assembling furniture, arranging and rearranging the small room until it felt right. Gideon was surprisingly handy with tools, explaining that he'd built things with his father as a child. He wanted me to know how to work with my hands, he said as he tightened the last screw on the crib. Said no amount of money could replace practical skills. Wise man, Amaya commented, folding tiny onesies and placing them in the dresser. He was. Both my parents were. They died in a car accident when I was 22. Emma was just 18. Amaya paused in her folding. So you raised her? In a way, yes. Though she would have said she raised me. His smile was sad but fond. She was always the more responsible one, even though she was younger. As the afternoon wore on, the nursery transformed. From an empty space to a room filled with promise, the walls once bare now held simple decorations. A mobile above the crib, a small bookshelf filled with children's books, a soft lamp that cast a warm glow. It's perfect, Amaya said, standing in the doorway with Gideon beside her, surveying. Their work, almost, Gideon replied. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small package. One last thing. Inside was a delicate silver frame, holding a sonogram picture, Amaya's most recent ultrasound, which she'd mentioned during one of their calls. How did you get this? She asked, surprised. I called your doctor's office. Don't worry, he added, quickly seeing her expression. I didn't use my name or influence. I just said I was a friend helping with the nursery and asked if they could email a copy. They checked with you first. Amaya remembered the call from the doctor's office, asking permission to send the ultrasound image to her friend. She'd agreed, without thinking much of it. Thank you, she said softly, placing the frame on the small table beside the rocking chair. It's the perfect finishing touch. They ordered pizza for dinner, eating it on Amaya's small balcony as the sun set. The day had brought a new ease to their relationship, the shared task creating a bond that transcended their complicated beginning. Pentier. I ask you something? Amaya said as they finished their meal. Anything. That first night in the hospital. You said something about wanting to be there this time. About a second chance. She met his eyes directly. What did you mean exactly? Gideon was quiet for a long moment. After Emma died, I couldn't forgive myself for not being there. I kept thinking that if I had been, things might have been different. She might still be alive. He looked out at the darkening sky. When I got your text, saw your picture, it felt like the universe was offering me a chance to not make the same mistake twice, to be there for someone who needed support. Is that all I am? A chance at redemption? No, Gideon said firmly. At first, maybe there was an element of that, but now... He trailed off, searching for the right words. Now you're Amaya, just Amaya. Someone I care about, not because of what happened in the past, but because of who you are. The sincerity in his voice made Amaya's heart beat faster. For the first time since Derek had left, she felt seen, truly, seen by someone. I care about you too, she admitted quietly, more than I expected to. Gideon reached across the small table, his hand finding hers. The touch was gentle, questioning. Amaya turned her palm up, intertwining their fingers in answer. They sat that way as night fell, holding hands in comfortable silence, the nursery behind them ready for new life, their hearts cautiously opening to new possibilities. The next few weeks passed in a blur of preparations and growing closeness. Gideon became a regular presence in Amaya's life, stopping by with groceries, helping with last-minute nursery adjustments, even accompanying her to a doctor's appointment when she asked him to. He never pushed for more, never made her feel indebted for his help. He was simply there, present in a way Derek had never been, even before he left. At 8.5 months pregnant, Amaya waddled more than walked, her body preparing for the birth that was still weeks away. Or so she thought. It happened on a Tuesday evening. Gideon had just left after bringing dinner. He'd been teaching himself to cook, with mixed results that they'd laughed over together. Amaya was getting ready for bed when she felt it. A sharp pain followed by a gush of fluid. Her water had broken. Panic seized her. It was too early. She wasn't ready. She wasn't, and Gideon had just left. He was probably still on the road. She grabbed her phone, her hands shaking as she dialed his number. "Miss me already?" he answered, the smile evident in his voice. "Gideon," she gasped as another contraction hit. "My water broke. The baby's coming." "I'm turning around right now," he said, his tone instantly serious. "I'm 10 minutes away. Can you call an ambulance?" "I think so." The pain subsided momentarily. "But it's too early, Gideon. She's not supposed to come for another 3 weeks. Babies make their own schedules," he said, trying to keep his voice calm despite the fear she could hear underneath. "Call the ambulance, then stay on the line with me. I'll be there as soon as I can." Amaya called 911, explained the situation, and was told an ambulance was on its way. Then she called Gideon back. "They're coming," she told him, breathing heavily. "But I'm scared. What if something's wrong?" "Everything's going to be fine," Gideon assured her, though she could hear the tension in his voice. "Just focus on your breathing. Remember what Dr. Patel taught you." Amaya tried to control her breathing as another contraction seized her. They were coming faster now, more intense. "I don't think I can wait for the ambulance," she said, when the pain subsided enough to speak. "These contractions are really close together." "I'm 5 minutes away," Gideon said. She could hear the sound of his car accelerating. "Just hold on." The next contraction was so intense that Amaya dropped the phone. She could hear Gideon's voice calling her name, but couldn't respond as the pain washed over her. By the time she could reach for the phone again, she heard pounding on her door. "Amaya, it's me, let me in." Somehow she made it to the door, opening it to find Gideon's worried face. He took one look at her and knew. "We're not waiting for the ambulance," he decided, scooping her into his arms despite her protests that she could walk. "My car's right outside. We'll get to the hospital faster." The drive was a blur of pain and fear. Gideon broke every speed limit, talking to her constantly, keeping her focused on his voice rather than the panic threatening to overwhelm her. They reached the hospital just as another powerful contraction hit. Gideon carried her through the emergency entrance, shouting for help. Everything moved quickly after that. Nurses appeared, a wheelchair was brought, and Amaya was rushed to the maternity ward. Gideon followed, holding her hand until they reached the delivery room doors. "You'll need to wait here, sir," a nurse told him. "Are you the father?" Before Gideon could answer, Amaya gripped his hand tighter. "I want him with me," she said through gritted teeth. "Please." The nurse looked between them, then nodded. "Come with me then. We'll get you prepped." As they wheeled Amaya into the delivery room, Gideon leaned down and whispered in her ear, "I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere." And for the first time since this journey began, Amaya believed that someone would stay, that she wouldn't have to do this alone. "I know," she whispered back, just before another contraction claimed her. The delivery room was a flurry of activity. Nurses moved efficiently around Amaya, checking monitors, adjusting equipment, preparing for the birth that was progressing faster than anyone had expected. "The baby's coming quickly," Dr. Patel announced after examining Amaya. "She's eager to meet you." Gideon stood by Amaya's side, still dressed in his jeans and button-down shirt from earlier. A nurse had given him scrubs to put on over his clothes, and his hair was disheveled from the frantic drive to the hospital. "You're doing great," he told Amaya, holding her hand as another contraction seized her. "Just breathe." Amaya gripped his hand so tightly her knuckles turned white. When the contraction passed, she looked up at him, fear evident in her eyes. "What if I can't do this?" she whispered. "What if I'm not ready to be a mother?" Gideon brushed a strand of hair from her damp forehead. "You already are a mother," he said softly. "You've been taking care of her for months. This is just the moment you finally get to meet." His words calmed her, grounding her in the reality of what was happening. This wasn't just pain and fear. It was the beginning of something wonderful. "It's time to push," Dr. Patel announced. On the next contraction, Amaya. What followed was the most intense experience of Amaya's life. The pain was overwhelming, but so was the determination. Gideon never left her side, his steady presence an anchor in the storm of sensation. "One more big push," Dr. Patel urged. "She's almost here." With a final tremendous effort, Amaya pushed, and suddenly the pain gave way to a different sensation entirely as her daughter entered the world with a strong, indignant cry. "She's here," Dr. Patel said, lifting the tiny, squirming baby for Amaya to see. "And she's perfect." Tears streamed down Amaya's face as the nurses quickly cleaned the baby and placed her on Amaya's chest. She was tiny, but complete. 10 fingers. 10 toes, a shock of dark hair and eyes that, when they briefly opened, seemed to contain all the wisdom of the universe. "Hello, little one," Amaya whispered, her heart expanding with a love so profound it took her breath away. "I've been waiting for you." She looked up at Gideon, expecting to share this moment of joy, but was startled to see tears streaming down his face. He made no move to wipe them away, seemingly unaware of them as he stared at the baby with an expression of wonder and grief so intertwined it made Amaya's heart ache. "Gideon," she said softly. He blinked, coming back to himself. "She's beautiful," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "So beautiful." Understanding dawned. This moment, a baby girl being born, must be bringing back all his memories of Emma, of the niece or nephew he never got to meet. "Would you like to hold her?" Amaya asked. Gideon looked startled. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." With trembling hands, Gideon accepted the tiny bundle. His large frame seemed to curl protectively around the newborn as he held her, a natural instinct that made Amaya's eyes fill with fresh tears. "What's her name?" a nurse asked, clipboard in hand. Amaya had been considering names for months, but had never fully decided. Now, watching Gideon holding her daughter with such tenderness, she knew. "Emma," she said. "Emma Blake." Gideon's head snapped up, his eyes wide with surprise and something deeper, gratitude, perhaps, or a love he wasn't ready to name. "Are you sure?" he asked again, his voice barely audible. Amaya nodded. "I'm sure. Emma for your sister, a name with strength and heart, just what my daughter will need." The hours that followed passed in a blur. Emma was examined, measured, pronounced healthy despite being 3 weeks early. "She's small but mighty," the pediatrician declared with a smile. Amaya was moved to a recovery room, exhausted, but too filled with joy and adrenaline to sleep. Gideon stayed, making calls to ensure everything at the hospital was taken care of, bringing Amaya ice chips and adjusting her pillows with a tenderness that made the nurses exchange knowing glances. As night fell, Amaya finally dozed off, Emma sleeping peacefully in the bassinet beside her bed. She woke briefly when she felt a gentle touch on her hand. "I'm going to step out for a bit," Gideon whispered. "Get some coffee, make a few calls. I'll be back soon." Amaya nodded sleepily and drifted back to sleep. When she woke again, sunlight was streaming through the hospital window. Emma was still sleeping, her tiny chest rising and falling with each breath. Amaya watched her, overwhelmed by the miracle of her existence. A nurse entered, carrying a tray with breakfast and a vase holding a single yellow rose. "Good morning, Mama," the nurse said cheerfully. "How are you feeling?" "Sore. Tired." "Amazing," Amaya replied truthfully. The nurse smiled. "That sounds about right. Your first day as a mother." Amaya looked around the room. Has Gideon been back? The tall gentleman who was with you yesterday. Nobody called to check on you both about an hour ago. He asked us to give you this when you woke up." The nurse handed Amaya an envelope. Inside was a handwritten note on simple stationery. "Amaya, watching you bring Emma into the world was the most profound experience of my life. You were magnificent, strong, brave, everything your daughter will learn to be because of you. I stepped away because I realized something important. I don't want to be the man who steps in. I want to be the man you step toward. If you and Emma ever want more than just a birth partner, I'm still here. Take all the time you need. I'll wait. Gideon." Amaya read the note twice, her heart beating faster with each word. She understood what he was doing, giving her space, ensuring she didn't feel pressured or obligated after the intensity of the birth. It was a gesture of respect, of understanding. And yet, Emma stirred in her bassinet, making tiny noises that would soon become cries. Amaya reached for her, lifting her daughter into her arms with a confidence that surprised her. It was as if her body already knew what to do, how to hold this precious life. "What do you think, Emma?" she whispered, brushing a finger against the baby's soft cheek. "Should we make him wait? Or should we tell him the truth, that we already chose him?" As if in answer, Emma's eyes opened, dark blue and seemingly all-knowing. Amaya smiled, her decision made. "Nurse," she called. When the woman appeared in the doorway, Amaya asked, "Could I borrow your phone? Mine is still in my purse and I need to make a call." The nurse handed over her cell phone with a knowing smile. Amaya dialed Gideon's number from memory. He answered, on the first ring. "Hello?" "It's me," Amaya said. "Where are you?" "In the hospital cafeteria," Gideon replied, surprise evident in his voice. "I wanted to be close in case you needed anything." "I do need something," Amaya said. "I need you to come back to the room." "Now?" "Right now." 15 minutes later, though Amaya suspected he'd run the whole way, Gideon appeared in the doorway. He looked rumpled and tired, as if he hadn't slept all night. "Is everything okay?" he asked, concern etched on his face. Emma's perfect," Amaya assured him. "Come here." Gideon approached the bed cautiously. Amaya patted the edge, inviting him to sit. When he did, she handed him his note. "I got this," she said. "I meant every word," he replied, not meeting her eyes. "I know you did, and I appreciate the sentiment, giving me space, not pressuring me." Amaya reached out, her hand finding his. "But I don't need space, Gideon. And I don't need time." He looked up then, hope and caution warring in his eyes. "What do you need?" "You," Amaya said simply. "Not because you're wealthy or powerful, not because you've helped me or been there for me, though I'm grateful for all of that, but because, somewhere between that wrong number text and this hospital room, I fell in love with you." The words hung in the air between them, honest and unadorned. Amaya hadn't planned to say them, but once spoken, she knew they were true. Gideon's expression transformed, caution giving way to a joy so pure it made him look younger, unburdened. "I love you too," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I think I have since that first phone call." He leaned forward, his forehead touching hers in a gesture of such tenderness that Amaya's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know what happens next," she admitted. "I've never done this before. Being a mother, falling in love with a billionaire." Gideon laughed softly. "I've never done this either. Falling in love with a woman who accidentally texted me. Being present for the birth of a child who shares my sister's name." As if aware she was being discussed, Emma made a small sound from her bassinet. Gideon immediately stood to check on her. "May I?" he asked, gesturing toward the baby. Amaya nodded, watching as he lifted Emma with the same careful tenderness he'd shown yesterday. He brought her to the bed, sitting beside Amaya so they were both looking down at the tiny face. "I think," Gideon said slowly, "what happens next is whatever we want to happen, whatever feels right for all three of us." "And what feels right to you?" Amaya asked. Gideon was quiet for a moment, considering. "Being together," he said finally. "Not rushing, but not waiting either. Building something real, something lasting." "I'd like that," Amaya said softly. "Very much." He leaned in, his lips meeting hers in a gentle kiss, their first. It was brief, but filled with promise, a beginning rather than an ending. When they parted, Gideon smiled. "So no making me wait." "No waiting," Amaya confirmed. "Emma and I already chose you. The moment you showed up at the hospital that first night, I think a part of me knew." "Knew what?" "That you were someone who would stay. Someone who would show up again and again. Not because you had to, but because you wanted to." Gideon looked down at Emma, who had fallen asleep in his arms, her tiny hand curled around his finger. "She's going to have you wrapped around her little finger," Amaya observed with a smile. "She already does," Gideon admitted. "Both of you do." A nurse appeared in the doorway. "Ms. Blake, the doctor will be in shortly to check on you and the baby." "Thank you," Amaya said. Then, hesitating only briefly, she added, "And could you update my contact information? In case of emergency, the person to call is Gideon Hart." The nurse smiled, making a note on her clipboard. "Relationship to patient?" Amaya looked at Gideon, a question in her eyes. He nodded, understanding passing between. Them without words. "Family," Amaya said firmly. He's family. After the nurse left, Gideon carefully placed Emma back in her bassinet, then returned to sit beside Amaya on the bed. Family, he repeated, testing the word. I like the sound of that. So do I, Amaya said, leaning her head against his shoulder. It's been a long time since I've had a family. For me, too. Gideon wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. But I think we're off to a good start. As they sat together watching Emma sleep, Amaya thought about the journey that had brought them here. A wrong number text sent in a moment of loneliness, a response from a stranger that had changed everything. Some might call it chance or coincidence. But as Gideon pressed a kiss to her temple, as Emma sighed contentedly in her sleep, Amaya called it what it truly was, the beginning of their story. A story of two people who found each other when they needed it most, who chose each other despite the odds, who built a family from the foundation of a single mistaken text message to the wrong number, with love. 3 months later, Amaya stood in the nursery of a new home, a comfortable house with a garden and a view of the park. Emma was growing quickly, her personality emerging more each day. She had Amaya's eyes and determination, already, fighting to hold her head up, to see the world around her. Gideon appeared in the doorway, watching as Amaya rocked their daughter to sleep. He still looked at them both with wonder sometimes, as if he couldn't quite believe his good fortune. They were taking things slowly, as promised. Gideon had helped Amaya find this house, close enough to his penthouse for frequent visits, but still her own space. He spent most nights here now, unable to bear being away from them for long. She's finally asleep, Amaya whispered as Emma's eyes fluttered closed. Gideon crossed the room, his footsteps silent on the carpet. He knelt beside the rocking chair, his hand gently stroking Emma's dark hair. I have something for you, he said softly, reaching into his pocket. Both of you, actually. He pulled out a small velvet box. Amaya's breath caught as he opened it, revealing not a ring but a delicate gold locket. Open it, he urged. Inside was a tiny photo of Emma, her first official portrait. On the other side was the sonogram picture, the one Gideon had framed for the nursery all those months ago. It's beautiful, Amaya whispered, tears in her eyes. Turn it over, Gideon said. On the back was an engraving, to the wrong number, with love. I thought you might like to have it, Gideon said, to remember how we started. As if I could ever forget, Amaya replied, leaning down to kiss him softly. As they put Emma in her crib, as they walked hand in hand to the living room, as they built their life together day by day, they both knew the truth. Sometimes the wrong number leads to exactly the right person, and sometimes a single text message can change everything.